Good afternoon and welcome to everyone to the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund informational webinar. We're on number 4, I think, maybe 5. We're so glad that you're all here. Please come on in, introduce yourself in the chat, including your name, your organization and title. If you want to put contact info in there, you can. And also your land acknowledgement would be great. We're going to go over a couple of housekeeping things. I'm going to tap dance for a couple of minutes to let everybody come on into the room. But so that you know, we do ask, you can start putting in questions whenever, but we ask you that you put all questions into the Q&A instead of into the chat. It helps us in a variety of ways. One of those being Beatrice will be covering the Q&A, and it's much easier for her to keep up with answers if they're all one place instead of having to cover both. The other reason is we will produce a transcript from the Q&A at the end of the webinar and send it out to you with other supplies. So if everything's in the Q&A, then all the questions and all the answers, it's much easier for us to more quickly gather that together. So let's start at the beginning, Terry, and maybe introduce yourself. My name is Terry Ball, and I am the Senior Programs Manager for Californians for the Arts, and I'm so pleased that you are all here today. We can go to the next slide, Allison. So we've given these tips to go ahead and introduce yourselves. The other thing to know, so that you don't feel like you have to memorize everything, you will get a follow-up email this afternoon, late this evening, depending upon how my afternoon goes, that will give you a link to a recording of this webinar, the slide deck, the Q&A, as I've talked about, also a links document. Martha, who is manning the chat, is probably already put in a link to a document. What we tried to do is put all the links into one document for you. That way you're not having to wildly cut and paste or worry about, oh, did I miss that link as we go through. That document will not only have all of the various links that we talk about today, but it also has some Zoom tips in it to hopefully make your life easier. So let's go to the next slide. Introducing our two organizations, California Arts Advocates and California for the Arts are two distinct nonprofits. California for the Arts is the statewide arts advocacy service organization. We're operating this program. We do a lot of other grassroots advocacy and education programs throughout the year. Then California Arts Advocates, it's not serving well that my tongue doesn't seem to be working today, is the comprehensive lobbying organization. Those two things need to stay separate, as we all know and understand. From our team at Californians for the Arts here today, I am joined by other members of our PAEPF team. Beatrice Casagran, who in her other life is also the artistic director for Ophelia's Jump. And we also have Martha Dimson here, who in her other life is involved with both TIPSCA, the theater producers of Southern California, and also Open Fist Theater in Los Angeles. And we have Allison McSwain, who in her other life is a fabulous young lighting designer. So that is our crowd today. Beatrice will be manning the Q&A. Martha will be manning the chat, and Allison will be running the slides and keeping me out of any technological trouble. The other thing that will happen is if you forget and put a question into the chat, Martha will give you a friendly reminder to move it over to the Q&A. We don't want to reward bad behavior, so we won't answer your questions in the chat, but we will remind you to just move it over to the Q&A. Your questions help everyone else, and if we keep them all in the Q&A, everyone sees them. The answers are right there next to, as opposed to being, separated off in the chat. So we are very grateful for your support in doing that. Next slide, Allison. We've talked about this, to please put your questions in the chat. Next. So these are the Zoom tips that I talked about, and these also should be in that document that Martha linked. This talks about how to turn on closed captioning, if that is helpful for you, down at the bottom of the screen. Next. Then we have some tips on how to rearrange your screen. As you know, the view that you have is unique to you, so you can rearrange it all however you want, and you won't miss anything. You won't be bothering anyone else. We're sorry, Martha has just realized she's been posting not to the public chat, but to the hosts. So she's going to catch up now, and you'll get a whole bunch of chats from her. We're all having a lot of grace and rolling with doing a lot of different things. So not a problem, Martha, and Martha will catch up on those items now. Okay, next. Community partners. In order to effectively market this program, do outreach for this program around the state, we have partnered with a bunch of fabulous organizations across the state. One of the things that all of these organizations is doing is helping us host these webinars and get the word out. They also, though, are going to be a point of contact for organizations throughout the process. You can always come to CFTA for technical support, but you can also reach out to these great organizations around the state for assistance information as well. Next. So we have a series of webinars that are hosted by our great community partners. This is what is still remaining. And the webinars are open to everyone. So we're hosting them with specific partners to help get the word out to specific audiences, but you and everyone else is welcome to attend any webinar. All of the webinars are recorded, and all of the webinars cover the same information. The only differentiation is the specific questions that might come up in the Q&A. All of them are recorded and posted to the CA for the Arts website. The two that we've just added both happen to be on February 25th. I've been told the links for those will be up on the website for registering by the end of the day. We're a little short-staffed and spread thin right now at CFTA. But one of those, the one at 1 o'clock, will be with Playhouse Arts up in Northern California. And then in the afternoon at 4 o'clock, we're doing one with the Latino Theater Company at LATC in Los Angeles. And this one will be a Spanish language simultaneous translation. So that will have all of the materials available in Spanish as well. Next. SV Creates. These are our partners in crime here today. And we're very excited to have Jessica Kwong, their community engagement manager, with us. And Jessica, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about SV Creates.
Thank you, Terry. It's so great to be here today and partner with you on the PAEPF. So a little bit about SV Creates for those of you who don't know. We are the county arts agency for Santa Clara County. So that means that we elevate Silicon Valley's creative culture. That's our mission. And we do this through three main aspects: capacity building, visibility, and accessibility. So that includes grant making, providing workshops to arts leaders and artists in our community, facilitating roundtables, and producing an annual conference. We also have a magazine, content magazine, which features the creative people of Silicon Valley. And we also provide access to arts education through grants to public school teachers to get arts education in their classrooms, and also providing community and court schools with studio with digital art lessons. So that's SB Creates in a nutshell. And it's so great to see so many of you who have participated in some of our capacity building programs in this webinar today. If you have any questions about the PAEPF, I'm happy to help you get the answers that you need.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your help in promoting the program and spreading the word and making sure everyone knows about it. Okay, next. Just a reminder to take a moment and celebrate, and that advocacy does, in fact, work. That's the only reason we're here today. As many of you know, this program I don't know. We just had a question about the slideshow. I'm seeing the slideshow. Can people in the chat all see the slideshow? We currently have a slide up that says advocacy works. Okay. So yes,
Okay.
Beatrice, it does seem that everyone is seeing the slideshow.
Well, then I do not need to.
There you go. Thank you for asking, though. Okay, as long as everybody's good, then we will keep rolling. All right, the only reason this program exists is because of advocacy on both the grassroots and what we like to call the grass tops. Several years ago, a small but mighty group of performing arts organization leaders came together to advocate and voice for the need for funding to help organizations as we transition to dealing with the new implications for the new employment laws in California. And the result is that we are here today. It was a long process. It took a lot of fight, first to get the program passed, then to get the budget allocated so that there were some funds for the program. And then last May, a surprise extra fight as those funds were almost taken away during the May revised budget process last year. But I wanted to take a moment to celebrate that we got here, to thank you all for the emails and the meetings and everything that you did along the way to help get us here and make this possible. Okay, next, on to why we are in fact here. What is the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund? It was created to support small nonprofit performing arts organizations with revenues under $2 million in hiring and retaining employees. The fund reimburses a portion of payroll costs on a quarterly basis. The program's goal is to restore resilience and build sustainability in the sector through an investment in creative jobs. These are state dollars. This is not money that CFTA is giving away. These are state dollars that were part of the state budget. The program is housed under the California Office of the Small Business Advocate, lovingly referred to as Cal OSBA, and managed by Californians for the Arts. Cal OSBA wisely reached out to an industry partner to help them manage this program with the full knowledge that the performing arts is a unique and different animal. And so having an organization like Californians for the Arts that understands the industry and is here to be your voice and help us navigate. One thing to remember, this is a brand new program. It is really a first of its kind in the nation. It is legislation that was passed, but as we all know in the advocacy process, there's a process that goes from an idea that gets advocated and pushed for, it turns into legislation, and then hopefully gets passed into law. And then the rubber truly hits the metal once that law becomes a program, and the lawyers get involved and tell you what the legislation really means. So we are setting up this program, and there are some questions that you may find that are responses. Let us check with the state and get some clarification, because this is brand new, and there are some things that come up that we're still clarifying. The great news is that the application portal is set to open on March 10th. Applications will be reviewed on a first come, first served basis in the order that they're received. Okay, next. Who can apply? Both 501c3 organizations and also fiscally sponsored organizations. If you're coming in as a fiscal sponsor, you, the fiscal sponsor, do not have to qualify. It's the fiscally sponsored organizations that have to qualify. If you, as a fiscal sponsor, you do meet the eligibility requirements, you are allowed to apply for your own organization under the 501c3 application, and then also apply separately as a fiscal sponsor for potentially eligible of your fiscal sponsees. Only Model C fiscally sponsored organizations are eligible. Okay, next. So this is a grant that is based very, very much on specific eligibility criteria. It is about information that you will provide both in, answers to questions and in documents. There is not a narrative component here. This is not a situation where we are comparing different organizations to each other. You are evaluated yourself as to whether you qualify or not. And then we will process applications, as we said, on a first come, first served basis until the program runs out of money. So those eligibility criteria are first, that you're either a 501c3 or a Model C fiscally sponsored organization. Remembering that as a Model C fiscally sponsored organization, you yourself do not complete the application. Your fiscal sponsor does. Your fiscal sponsor will technically be the grantee. That as an organization, you have to be producing or presenting performing arts that are open to the public. You have to be hiring and paying workers as employees, not independent contractors. You have to be in compliance with California sexual harassment training requirements. This is one that causes some people some question. There are variables involved in the California sexual harassment training requirements. There is a link here to take you to a state page that helps you understand what those requirements are for your individual organization. They are different for temporary employees versus permanent employees. There's also variation based on the size of your organization. So we are not going to go through all of that today. You do not have to submit your, those of you who've been through sexual harassment training classes know you get a certificate at the end. You do not have to submit people's certificates. You will, as an organization, have to certify that your organization is in compliance. So it's important for you to figure that out. And there are some resources here to help you figure that out. You also have to be in compliance with California labor laws, including those around the proper classification of employees. Again, this is something that you will certify. There's a certification of compliance that your authorized signer will sign off on for each of these items, and then attest to the truth of them. So it is in your best interest to be determining at this point that you are in fact in compliance with California labor laws, including that you are classifying all of your employees correctly. I know that this can be a little confusing with both AB5 and also the statute that covers musicians, but this is something that we can't advise you specifically as to whether you're in compliance or not. I recommend that you work with your board and with a labor lawyer to make sure that you're in compliance, because the rules are different for some of the different genres and different situations. You have to have a written DEI policy and a written anti-harassment policy in place and approved by your board. These two policies you will be uploading as part of the application process. If these are in your employee manual, for example, that's fine. You'll just upload those specific pages. And you will include when they were adopted and when they were last updated. There is no requirement for a time frame for when these policies have been in place. So if you are getting in compliance now and getting these policies in place, that is fine. You don't have to, have had them 3 years ago. Um, completely lost my train of thought. So you can work on this now and be getting yourself ready before the application portal opens in March. You also have to have a mission statement in place. You need to be in good standing with the California Secretary of State. And there's a link here to the California Secretary of State website where you can check your standing and you can download this certificate that is being referred to here. This is a document that you will download and upload with your application while you're there on this same website. You can also check out your statement of information, which is important for this process because that's your list of your authorized signer needs to be one of the officers listed on your statement of information. Those are people that can legally sign documents for your organization. You need to be able to provide 990s for the last 3 filed years. So not 2004, we understand people haven't filed that yet. And these can be 3 of the last 5 years. So if, for example, you haven't filed 2023 yet because you had some circumstance and you've gotten an approved extension, you're still fine. We just need the 3 last filed years of 990s. If you file a 990 in, which then doesn't have financial information on it, then you will instead file the form CTTR1, and because that does have your financial information. You have to have adjusted average annual revenue under $2 million. And we will go through in a little bit how that is calculated. And you have to not fall under any of the list of ineligible types of organizations. So let's go to the next page and talk about those. Some of the reason for these, the point of this legislation is this is a workforce development program. So this is designed specifically to help organizations in hiring paid employees and specifically those around the performing arts and performers, as well as other employees. So there is a list of organizations here. Some of them are around youth organizations where there are youth performers as opposed to adult paid performers. But it's important to look at this list because if your primary focus of your organization is any of these functions, then you will not be eligible. If you are primarily an after-school program, if you're a nonprofit that's raising money only for a single organization, if you're a social club where everyone is volunteering, these different categories will not be eligible. Now, some of you are probably wondering, well, our main focus is that we are a music company that does performances for the public, but we have a youth program also. It is all right that you have a secondary program that is a youth program. What you can't be is primarily a youth program. If you are eligible as an organization, then all of your employees will be eligible for reimbursement, including those that might be working on those youth programs. I want to pause here because all these eligibility criteria are important, and this is an area that sometimes causes a lot of questions. What I'll let you know just for the cadence of the whole Q&A is we will pause at a few different locations to have Beatrice share with us the questions and answers that have been coming up. If at any point during the webinar, there is something that Beatrice feels like needs to be addressed immediately, she will stop me and we will go over that. But we'll pause like this a few times through to go ahead and be putting your questions in the Q&A. And Beatrice, you're on.
I think this is a very maybe deep thinking, erudite group because I've gotten almost no questions.
We got the
just
brainiacs
really
today.
absorbing everything you're saying. Somebody is asking about why youth organizations are excluded, like a youth symphony, and so it goes back to why this was put in place. And as Terry just said, it really was about generating and paying artists and workforce and workforce development. And at that point, resources were limited. If you have a symphony made up of youngsters who are not paid, it was just a decision that was made during that process that would not be covered. It doesn't mean that in the future some law will not cover you, but this particular grant excludes youth performing arts groups.
The follow-up that I will say, Beatrice has stated that very, very well. One of the realities of advocacy and starting new programs is that you can't get everything. And sometimes, particularly in a situation where funds are limited, as they are in the state, and starting a new program. And also, you know, there's the old saying about you don't want to see how the sausage gets made. There are compromises that have to happen sometimes along the process in getting laws passed. And it is, you know, in the end, you don't necessarily get everything you want or everything you'd hoped for. But so it's not that anyone undervalues the contribution or the importance of youth organizations. That's not the case at all. The coalition and the group of legislators and trying to get a program through that was a first of its kind program, there are challenges, and we were not able to get absolutely everything that we might have hoped for in the program, and there are limited funds. So the whys in the hows, like any program, it is not for everyone. And please, it is not anything personal to those organizations that it is not in service of. But this is the reality.
And maybe at this point, we should also clarify that if you have a company that is basically an adult company that performs for theater for young audiences, but all the participants are basically adults that you're paying, that is not excluded. That is different.
Yes, exactly. The content is not where the youth limitation comes in. Okay. We're going to move on and talk about the overview of the program. You see, and there we go. Thanks, Allison. All right. The way this program works is it is about reimbursements, and those reimbursements are tiered at different levels. One of the goals of the program is to encourage and support people making the transition to properly classifying their workers as employees when they should be. The goal also is to help, the smallest organizations with the greatest support up to the largest in this tier with the smaller support. So we're going to talk about figuring out this adjusted gross revenue, and then there's a tier. Those organizations that are 250,000 and below get an 80% reimbursement of their eligible payroll expenses that we'll talk about in just a minute, up to the largest organizations, which is the 1.75 million, up to 2 million, and those organizations are eligible for a 20% reimbursement of their eligible expenses. So let's talk about adjusted gross revenue. So we're going to take an average of 3 years. Those 3 years that are represented on the 990s that we talked about, you're going to submit. We're going to take the total revenue from those 3 years and average it together, and that's going to come up with your adjusted gross revenue. Understanding, though, that sometimes people have some sources of income that inflate their annual revenue above what their actual operating budgets are. Something like a big capital donation that is restricted for just capital. So there's 3 different categories of income that you are allowed to exclude from your adjusted gross revenue. And there's a form that's going to help you calculate all this. But I want you to understand first the kinds of of revenue. So if you have revenue earmarked by a grantor or donor solely for capital expenditures, that you can separate out when we're calculating your average revenue. If you have pass-through funds that you have collected, but they're for the benefit of another organization, such as if you're a fiscal sponsor, that can be eliminated. And the one that's kind of confusing is referred to as funds received pursuant to section 8753.6. And these are special funds under the California Arts Council. This is not any of the public grant program funds. This is not general operating. This is not creative core or creative districts, any of that. This is two special funds. If you are getting funds directly from Keep Arts in Schools Fund or the Arts License Plate Fund, those are the only two that fall under this. Then you can exclude those in that category on the chart. For all three of these types of income that you might want to exclude so that you have a more accurate gross revenue, you will have to provide documentation for that. So let's go to the next slide. So there's going to be this chart in the application where you're going to fill out this information. So you're going to have the first line, you're going to put the year, and then you're going to fill out these different things. And then the chart will calculate for you what your 3-year average adjusted gross revenue is. And then you can go back to the chart and know what your percentage of reimbursement would be. I know it's a little like math class, but hang in there with me. Okay, next. So the way this works, the grants will cover 1 year of employee expenses. That's going to, and these are calculated by quarters. So there are 4 quarters involved here. I apologize for this slide. Terry made a last minute slide and the graphic design people have not had a chance to clean me up yet. So that's why things are a little off, and Allison will fix me after the fact. So the 4 quarters for reimbursement that will be covered by these grants are Q3 and Q4 of 2024 and Q1 and Q2 of 2025. So as you fill out the application, you're going to give us payroll expense information, and we're going to go over the details for these 4 quarters. 2 of those, you're going to be providing your actual expenses. And for the other 2 quarters, you're going to be projecting your expenses. Your grant, if you are approved, will be for a maximum amount of the total of those 4 quarters. That's the maximum the grant can be. Your actual grant will be dependent on the expenses that you submit for all 4 of those quarters. Now, the reason that we're doing it this way, this combination where you're projecting expenses, there is only $12.5 million in this fund. We anticipate that that is not enough money to actually cover all of the need. And yet we want to be able to let people know about the full year of funding and to guarantee that we have enough money once we have granted. So we need a hard number as we're approving applications so we know how many applications we can approve and move forward. When the actual those actual quarters happen in the spring, there may be funds left over. So as we are approving applications, we will actually continue to approve applications and put a portion of applications onto a wait list. You will know if you're approved which group you are in. Were you part of the group that is approved for right now to move forward, or are you part of the wait list? But that way we have additional applications to move on into the process if in fact all of the organization's projected expenses don't turn out to be where they are. We all know that sometimes we budget and life doesn't turn out. Productions might have to be canceled or whatever. So you're going to project your expenses. understand if your expenses are less than you expect them to be, then that lower amount is what you will receive. If they are more than you expect them to be, you are still capped at those projected expenses that you provide. So it's very important when you're going through and doing this that you make your projections as accurate as possible, but we ask you to not wildly overestimate. Number one, you're not going to get that extra money anyway. And number two, what you're doing is preventing other people from potentially getting funding. We're going ahead and collecting the additional applications for two reasons. One, as I've just said, it's going to help us to be able to spend all of the money, even if everyone's projections aren't accurate. Also, it helps us establish the need for more funds. Right now, we have 1 year of funding. So the other question to know is, this is right now 1 year of funding. This is not an ongoing program unless we convince the legislature through our group advocacy to refund the program. And the having a very large response and a large number of applicants will help establish for the legislature that this is a program that is important and impactful and needed. So one of the things that you all can do as an early effort in that application is encourage anybody that you know that might be eligible to come and find out and determine if they think they are eligible and to apply. So next.
Terry, could I introduce and just ask you a very quick question for housekeeping? I have a number of people who are emailing me right now, not able to get into the Zoom. I sent them the link from the webinar schedule, but that is also not sending them the link. Is there something you could send me or put in the chat that I could give them?
Hang on just a moment.
I'm so sorry. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
You should be able to send the link that I copied you on from this morning that we sent to Kathy.
Thank you.
Okay. So now let's talk about these payroll expenses. The other thing to note about the quarters that I have mentioned, these are calendar year quarters. Even if you are on a fiscal year, we're still strictly talking about calendar year. Everyone is talking about the same dates for these 4 quarters. Another thing to remember is that this is reimbursement. So you will be reimbursed for monies that you have actually already spent. You cannot apply for a grant and get money to hopefully hire people in the future. Also, these reimbursements are only for employee expenses. No expenses for independent contractors can be submitted for reimbursement. The reimbursements are made. Okay. Not sure what's going on there. Allison is going to fix that, but the reimbursements are made. We're having technical fun today. The reimbursements are made on a quarterly basis on the first $10,000 of payroll expenses per employee. And then this is, once you've calculated what the total is up to that $10,000, this is when that percentage of reimbursement we talked about kicks in. So if you get to that $10,000 and then you're under $250,000 a year, then what you would receive is 80% of that $10,000. You're going to have another form to enter here, and you're going to enter a unique line for each employee. And over here on the side, we have listed what you're going to be entering. You're going to start with their name. You're going to enter their hourly wage. Now, this is not part of the calculations. The hourly wage is specifically because one of the requirements of the grant is that you are paying everyone at least minimum wage. So you're entering this, so you're verifying that you're paying everyone at least minimum wage. We understand in many small arts organizations, you might pay someone different wages for different work. What you want to enter here is the lowest hourly wage that you pay someone. So if you pay them sometimes as an electrician and sometimes as a violinist, because they're a Renaissance person, then you're going to, whichever of those is lower, that's the hourly wage. If you pay someone a salary, either a monthly, annual, whatever, you're going to do the calculation so that you come down to an hourly wage for everyone. Then in the next column, you're going to enter gross wages. These are the total wages paid to that employee for that quarter. Then you can also get reimbursed for health benefits, employment benefit, retirement, pension benefits that you offer to your employees. So you're going to have a column where you enter those. Again, these need to be calculated down to per employee. So you might have to do calculations off of your invoices. Then you can do your payroll processing expenses. So if you're using a paymaster, a payroll service, Gusto, you're processing through QuickBooks, the expenses that you have around processing payroll, you can put in for reimbursement. Once again, these are done by quarter and by employee. So depending upon how you get your charges from your different payroll companies, you may again have to be doing some calculations here. Workers' compensation. Your workers' compensation premiums that you pay, you're going to calculate those down and figure out what you're paying per quarter, per employee. And I understand that in some cases, these are going to be calculations. Many of us pay workers' comp through a premium. You pay a premium up front for the year, and then you don't really know until the audit a year and a half later what the specific charges are per employee. But you can do your calculations. This is how much I paid for the quarter. This is how many employees I had, and calculate in that fashion. There are a couple of things that are not reimbursable. Any form of taxes, both federal and state, and that includes the taxes that are withheld from your employees' wages. So one of the things you're going to enter on this chart is the taxes withheld from the gross wages. This is not your tax liability, the employer liability. You can't be reimbursed for that, but that doesn't come into the form because it's not in the calculation. You just don't add that in. And the form will then do the fancy math and add up the allowable expenses, subtract out the withholding, and give you the total eligible amount. It will, if your total amount for that employee is over 10,000, then the form's going to cap out at 10,000. And then you go back to your handy dandy chart and see what your tier is, and that way you would know what you would be eligible for each of those employees. In the course of the application, you're going to do 4 of these charts, 1 for each of the quarters that we have talked about, Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. Okay, next. So this is just reviewing again what are the allowable expenses. And I think this is another good place, Beatrice, to pause and see how we're doing with questions.
We have a steady stream coming, and that's fine. I just want to be clear, we are not going to be able to give you any sort of definitive answer about your eligibility through this quick Q&A in this webinar, or actually even before the application process. So we might say to you, you are ineligible because you are a youth symphony and they are specifically ineligible. But if you're asking for a specific determination because you have, a situation where you're paying some people, it really is going to, you're going to probably need to apply in order to get that final determination. I'm sorry, some of you, I'm saying send an email because in this context, I can't tell you, yes, you're eligible. Most of us are just going to have to take that chance. It looks like we're eligible, we're complying, we're going to go through and look at all the different links that are being sent and see if we're complying with California law and things like that. That's research that you need to do, and then submit your application and it will be reviewed. But that's as much as we can do for you here and before the actual process.
Yeah, until you turn in your full package. And there's
Right.
just several variables. Until we have your full package, as Beatrice pointed out, we can probably tell you, yeah, this will make you ineligible. So you might not want to invest the time, but we cannot give you a definitive, yes, we guarantee you will be eligible. We're just, A, we're not allowed. And B, we just can't do it until we have the full package of information. I know it would be great because then you wouldn't go to the trouble, but unfortunately, the way this process works, and I didn't go over that, I think we're coming at, but we're doing an initial review and then the state will do the final approval. And we'll go over that in just a second. But do you have anything else that you want to deal with specifically right now, Beatrice?
Not at this point, no.
Okay.
May
All
I
right.
add one thing, Terry, really quickly?
Sure.
Something that has been coming up in emails that are written in, and I have seen here again today, is a little confusion over the ineligibility of eligibility of organizations who just raise money for a single organization. And as Beatrice correctly answered in the Q&A, that's for something like a booster group, someone who's a nonprofit whose sole purpose is to raise money for another nonprofit. For example, Friends of the LA Philharmonic. The only thing they do is raise money for the LA Philharmonic. That group would not be eligible. But nonprofits who raise money for themselves to keep their programming going, I think we all do that. So that does not exclude you from eligibility if you are raising money for yourselves as part of your business.
One of the things to keep in mind with all of the eligibility factors is, what is your primary mission? That's, when we talked about this a little bit earlier with the youth programs, what you want to do first and foremost is look at, what is your primary mission? If you are, for example, primarily an arts council, but you do one show a year to raise money for, or to showcase your artists, then you're probably not eligible because your primary focus is being an arts council, supporting artists, doing all of that. Your primary focus is not producing or presenting performances. So you're going to use that as a touchstone, is keep coming back to, what's the primary thing we do? Okay, next. And we've covered the questions. Here we go. All right, so here's what the process is going to be. You're going to submit your application, and along with documentation for the payroll expenses for those first 2 quarters, and we're going to screen that for eligibility. Californians for the Arts will conduct this initial review, and then they will go on to Cal OSBA for their final approval and issuing of grant agreements. Californians for the Arts will be your conduit of information for everything, but Cal OSBA is the final approver in the process. Again, as I stated before, these are not California for the Arts funds. This is not a California for the Arts grant program. We have been hired to manage the program for the state funds. Those that are approved and admitted to the program on a first come, first served basis until it reaches capacity, as we talked about before. Grantees will receive notification that they're approved and about the amount of their maximum award for the cycle. Then they will be sent a grant agreement for them to submit. Then the second phase is the processing of the monies. Once your grant agreement comes back, Cal OSBA will then begin processing payments for those first 2 quarters that you have submitted both documentation, both numbers for, and your documentation. Because Cal OSBA is part of the giant machine that is the state government, it will take 45 to 90 days for those payments to actually be processed. Part of what the message to you here is, the parts of this process that you can control, getting your grant agreement back, answering any questions we might have of you during the process. You want to do that in as timely a fashion as possible, so that we move you to that final step as quickly as possible. Then after Q1 of 2025, we'll go and you will submit your actual documentation and your revised actual payroll numbers for Q1. And again, those will be submitted to CA for the Arts. We'll put everything together. We'll pass it on to Cal OSBA. They'll do the final approval and checks will be processed. Following Q2 of 2025, we'll do the whole dance again until, which will then be the final quarter. And there will be a final report. Next. And this is just a graphic of that. I'm showing you through the process. The application portal, again, as we said, opens on March 10th. As CA for the Arts is reviewing your application, you may be contacted if, for example, there's a PDF that's blurry and we can't read it, or an answer that is a little confusing and we need clarification. You want to make sure that those responses are coming in a timely fashion, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. Next. Okay, the way that applications are going to be processed is through a portal called GoSmart. If any of you have worked in GoSmart before, you will want to set up a unique account specifically for this. If you applied through some other organization, you won't want to use that account. You'll want to set up a unique one. Next. So this is something you can do right now. You do not have to wait until the portal opens to set up your account. There is a tips page for dealing with GoSmart, and they have some great videos, and I would heavily suggest that you do that. Those are included in the links document that Martha has, the actual application portal where you go to set up your account. Things to know about once you hit the application process is everyone goes to the same place to set up the portal, both fiscal sponsors and 501c3 organizations. Once you get to the application, there are two separate applications, one for 501c3s, one for fiscal sponsors. When you are doing the application, you do not have to do the entire thing in one sitting. You can save your work and come back later. You can also navigate to different places in the application. Next. Okay, here's just a little graphic to show you through the process. As part of setting up your account, you are going to provide some of the information that will be required for your application about your organization. One thing to keep in mind when you are setting up this account, you're going to log in. There's going to be a choice to choose between an organization and an individual. You must set up an organization account because these grants are not available for individuals. So if you set up an individual account, when you go to apply, you won't be able to because it won't let you as an individual. You're going to want to set up a primary contact, username, password, etc. This does not have to be your authorized signer. This should be someone that this is an email that is actively checked on an ongoing basis. This is the email that we will communicate back to if there are any questions, if there are any issues, once your grant agreement is ready. So you don't want this to be, if your authorized signer, for example, is your board president, who might go on a cruise for 6 weeks and not check their email, that's not who the primary contact should be. This is a list of information here that you will need when you are setting up your account. You do not have to wait till March 10th to do all of this. You can do this now. These questions are part of the physical portal. So we didn't design the names for these questions. And so there's things like, it says state house district instead of state assembly district. That's just because this portal covers multiple states. There is a link here and in the links document where you can go and look up your representatives so you can fill in those districts. For this, this is a question that does not impact your eligibility. It helps us with record keeping and reporting. There is not a right or wrong answer to what is selected here. If your primary venue is in one district and your business address is in another, if your primary arts leader is in a different district and wants to, put in their address, there is no right or wrong. We need to know that a district and Senate district that is impacted by your organization. Part of advocacy is legislators want to know how their districts and their constituents are impacted, and this helps us with that reporting. So don't stress about this one. Just look at the district, and you can determine which specific representation you want to use. Next. Okay, as I talked about, now we're going to talk about when we get to March 10th, and there's the actual applications. There are 2 applications. 501c3s, you have 1 set of applications. If you are applying as a fiscal sponsor, there's a separate application. There is, and you will, if you are as a fiscal sponsor, fiscally sponsoring multiple applications, you're going to fill out a different application for each organization you are fiscally sponsoring. As you go through the fiscal sponsor application, pay attention to the questions, because there are some questions that refer to information about the fiscal sponsor and some about the sponsored organization, and the same for documents. So just pay attention and make sure you're answering the questions correctly. Next. Okay. We're going to highlight the information here. The program guidelines, which is the more complete document, goes through every page of the application. You can take it like a study guide and prepare yourself completely beforehand to fill out all of the questions, gather all your documents, and I encourage you to do this. So when you sit down to actually submit your application, it's a quick, no stress. You already know everything you're going to answer and have all your documents ready. So it's quick and easy that day. Your stress can come earlier if you have questions as you are preparing the documents. That's a process you can begin now. Okay, so this information, there are some questions that are asked because they were part of the legislation or they're part of the state's requirement for reporting. For example, the county and also the primary performance venue size. This is one of the questions that is asked in the legislation, is that they want to know from everyone the size of your primary performance venue. If you perform in multiple places, pick what you think is your primary one. Could be the one you perform in most frequently, the one that you view as your most home. This is not an answer that is going to impact your eligibility. It only is a requirement that you do answer it. What the answer is, we're not choosing large venues over small or small venues over large. Okay, next. So, as we talked about, this is all about information and documents. The first set of documents is going to be things that establish your eligibility as an organization. Your 501c3 letter, your articles of incorporation, that certified business certificate that we talked about from the Secretary of State, your 3990s or the other financial reporting, the DEI and anti-harassment policies that you have in place. With these, when you do upload, you are going to want to indicate in the PDF the date that it was adopted and when it was most recently updated. Those pieces of information, again, you're not evaluated on the content of the information, you simply have to provide it. Okay, next. So we've established the information about you as an organization. Now we're going to establish this part that you are producing and presenting performances for the public. And the way that we're going to do this is with production related documents. And this is a lot of threes, so hang in there with me. You're going to select 3 different productions from 3 different years within the last 5 years. These do not have to be the same years as your 990s. If you want to use 2024 for this, you absolutely can. These do have to be productions that already happened. They can't be future productions. But, and you do have to have 3 years of existence, so you can provide those 3 years of 990s. If you are just starting and 2024 was your first year, then again, unfortunately, you won't be eligible for the grant because you do have to have that 3-year history. So 3 productions from 3 different years, and for each production, you're going to select 3 pieces of evidence from this list of 6. So we understand different organizations have different things. You don't have to select something, all of them. You just have to select 3 of the 6. Reviews, for example, we understand it is very, very difficult in some areas these days to get a review. You don't have to select review. You can select playbill. You can select any of these other things. These documents are all going to be prepared and submitted as PDFs. So a separate PDF for each piece of evidence that you are providing, or documentation. So as an example, you might select, we did Angels in America in 2021, and I'm going to share a copy of a box office report, some evidence of paid advertisement, and a review. My second production, I'm going to supply documentation for The Shot from 2023. For this one, I'm going to select evidence of a paid advertisement, a review, and a copy of the playbill. My final of my 3 from a third different year is Helvetica, that we produced in 2024, with a box office report, social media posts, and email campaign posts. These are examples only. You can do the same 3. If you want to do a box office report from all 3, you can absolutely do that. They do not have to be. You just have to select 3 unique types of documents for each production. Okay, next. All right. So I think we're going to pause there again just for a second and see if there are any questions now, Beatrice.
Oh, there have been many.
Oh, good.
No, let me see. The question did come up again about the age of the Secretary of State certificate and how old that can be. We are looking that up and we'll have a definitive answer. Terry feels that if it's within 6 months, that should be okay, but we are waiting to hear from Cal OSBA on that, correct?
But yes, my recommendation, it takes nothing to go on and download it, to go and get it now. So I don't know that there's a reason for it. It takes 5 minutes. So my recommendation is get a fresh one.
Get it fresh as you can.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. It literally takes no time not literally, but it takes no time online.
Yeah.
The other thing that has come up a couple of times for smaller organizations, they're worried about what constitutes a review. First of all, I need to say a review is not the only thing. A lot of us don't get reviewed on a regular basis. But there are luckily several other categories you can pick from. However, what the review and those documents are going towards is to kind of show that you are doing this for the public. So I would say in that case, and Terry and Martha, you can chime in, but a Google review, something that has been published, something on a blog would be fine. So those things, I think you have a little bit of latitude. Ask yourself, is it something that was put somewhere publicly? All right.
Yeah, I wouldn't use a handwritten note from a patron or
Right.
an email that said great
Or
show.
yes,
But
exactly.
what you want,
yes.
but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a New York Times review. Blogs are a perfectly legitimate type of review. And as Beatrice said, if you don't have reviews, that's fine. Look at one of the 5 other categories. But the key to remember with all of those documents is you are trying to establish that your organization provides productions that are available to the public. So think about that as you are selecting. Go ahead, Beatrice.
Yeah, the other interesting thing that came up from 2 or 3 people today, I think we may have some tech savvy people here, is they're concerned that the site is going to be able to handle the influx of applications at 9 a.m. on March 10th. That is definitely a concern. However, you know what? This is a GoSmart portal that has been set up, and I'm sure that the state is looking at this. And if there are problems, it still won't change that as things are able to come in, they will be looked at on a first come, first served basis. I said, you know, that is all I can say about that. Somebody wanted to know if we're planning to have problems. No, we are not planning to have problems. We're planning not to have problems.
I would never say out loud, because I'm a very suspicious person, that it will
Yes.
all go beautifully. I will
Yes.
never say those words. What I will say is we will be closely monitoring it. This is, of course, something all of us are always concerned about with a portal like this. What I can also say, though, is this portal is one that is run by an organization that covers 4 different states. And they do grant programs that accept applications from 4 or 5 different states at a time. This application portal, this application process has a fairly limited pool of organizations. There are not 5,000 organizations in the state of California that will qualify for this grant. We're not going to get 10 or 15,000 applications coming in that day. So, does it concern me? Yes, because in my mind, it's bad karma not to be worried. That's just who I am. But we will all be monitoring it. I can tell you we'll all be there that day, and we have some contingencies, but we're all going to take a deep breath. I'm absolutely not going to promise you nothing will go wrong, because that will guarantee that something will go wrong. But we will all roll with it and make it work.
The other question that came in that I really I answered, but I'm looking for maybe some wisdom from you and Martha, is what constitutes a social club? And I said, you know, something I would think it would be something that, you know, people get together to play music. It's really not professional oriented at all. It's some people getting together because they have common interests, maybe an improv group who just, you know, does this. And it's not really, but that one, I'm not clear. I'm not clear about. So
I can give a little background on that exclusion. Terry, did you want to address it?
No, go ahead.
There are many social clubs in California. They are often sort of ethnically oriented cultural centers. So the Armenian Cultural Center, and they perform music and dance and different things out of that culture, but exclusively for their own members. So if you perform only for your members, then you are not, and you are this kind of a social club, then that is ineligible. Has to be open to the public.
Okay. With anything, if you are confused that you think you might be eligible, I would encourage you to go ahead and apply.
Yep.
And there will be the ability, and I would also say this about the documents. If you've got a document that you think is a little strange or needs interpretation, put a note in with the PDF. And there will be in various steps, a place where you can put in a note. There's no punishment for applying and then having the determination be made that you are not eligible. If you think you might, apply and include a note why you think you're not a social club, even though your name or your mission. Because one of the things that can also come up is many of us have legal names or initial missions for organizations, and then things change and migrate over time. So maybe your official name is, the School for Performing Arts, but you've long since dropped off the educational component, and you are now just doing your performances. We'll put in a note that explains that. Yes, I know our name is X, but here's the documentation, and you'll see from our documentation that that's not really representative of us anymore. One of the things that I've learned in helping people with these grants over the last several years since COVID is that there are. you know, old names and old things, and organizations have changed. And if can take the opportunity to try to explain that. That doesn't mean that it will be accepted and approved. But if you're don't self-eliminate. I would rather you apply and not be funded than not apply and then after the grant talk to a friend who were similar and they got funded. So err on the side of applying. We're okay with having extra applications that you know end up not being eligible. Anything else, Beatrice, before we keep going?
I have some more questions, but I think those are, I think we're good to keep going.
Okay. And just remember, everybody, you will get a transcript of the complete Q&A. Everyone will. Okay. So we've already gone through a lot of this income information. So I'm not going to go through it again in detail. I will tell you it's, go ahead, Beatrice. Did you want to
Terry,
say something?
I appear to have lost the ability to type an answer into the Q&A. I don't know why.
Well, that's interesting.
Hold on, let me try again. Yeah, okay, I have it back. So sorry.
Okay. That's all right.
It's all good. It's all good.
You know, at the end of the day, we are all slaves to the overlord that is the internet. And when the internet doesn't like you, it doesn't like you. Okay, so in the application, as we talked about before, there's going to be an income table. You can go to the next slide, Allison, where you're going to fill in the information that we reviewed. And then you're going to have your 4 tables for your 2 actual expenses and your 2 projected expenses. Go ahead, Allison. So then here are your projected, as we've talked about. Next. In the, this is a question that's been coming up. Those forms, these expense forms are not available yet because we're double checking them to make sure the formulas and everything are correct. They will, however, be available well before the portal opens. I'm hoping to have them public by early next week, and they will be available on the CFTA website. They'll be available in the portal, but we will also send out a link to everyone who's attended any of the webinars with those, because you are certainly encouraged to begin filling those out ahead of time. I know some of you within a quarter might have many employees. So in addition to the numbers for your employee expenses, sorry, you're also going to provide documentation. Unfortunately, we can't just take your word for it. So you are going to have to provide documentation. Now, unfortunately, because documentation is different for different organizations, what we have here is some examples. This is not an exhaustive or a mandatory list. You do not have to provide all of these things. You have to establish that the money that you show in the chart was actually spent. So for wages, if you are not part of a paymaster where the paymaster files separately and you don't ever see your quarterly wage statements, you can use, and the most recommended thing to use would be your quarterly wage statement that you file with the state, because it lists all of your employees. It's got their gross wages, the amount withheld. That's a quick and easy way to provide the information. It could also be your quarterly payroll register from one of your paymasters. What it can't be is you create a spreadsheet. It has to be some third-party evidence that these wages were spent in the way that you're saying. The same is true for your workers' comp, your health and pension, and your payroll and paymaster fees. As we talked about before, you're going to want to break these down per employee. So if you have a bill that doesn't break it down that way, here's where your magic notes come in. Put in the invoice that shows the amount you spent for the quarter, and then an explanatory page in that same PDF that says, this is how I came to the calculations that I put into the sheet. Help us interpret your information. This is also a moment to say, help us be able to evaluate and review your application as quickly and easily as possible. Make sure that your documents are clear and legible. Make sure that anything that you think is out of the ordinary, you explain in a note. The quicker we can review your document and the less we have to ask you any questions, the more quickly we can move on and get you approved and funded. These documents do need to be PDFs. You cannot take a picture of anything with your phone and send it in. I realize that cell phone cameras are lovely now, but that's not going to cut it. They can't be JPEGs. They do need to be PDFs. Okay, so I think we've covered this stuff well, so let's move on. Do you have any questions at this point, Beatrice?
Nope, we are doing well.
This is the Brain Trust group. Okay, next. As we talked about before, there are some questions that the answers are not going to impact your eligibility, but you are required to answer them. Some of these are listed in the statute, and we have to follow the statute. Some of these are state reporting requirements because this is state money. This is taxpayer dollars. And so Cal OSBA has to be able to report back to the legislature how this money was spent, how geographically it was spread around, what were the numbers of jobs created and retained, and all of that. So there will be questions that you will answer that you will say, we don't list all of these here, but every one of these questions is listed in the program guide. Next, certificate of compliance. There is, as we talked about before, a certificate of compliance that will be downloaded. This also will be available beforehand. Your authorized signer is going to sign the certificate of compliance. There's a number of different statements. They're going to sign off, and then they're going to sign the whole document saying that all of the information you have provided is true and accurate, that you are in compliance with the sexual harassment and those various other things. Take this seriously. You are signing a legal document and verifying its veracity. The state does have the right, if they come back and determine at some point that you have certified or provided any information that is not accurate, they can come back and take the money back. So do take this seriously and do consult and make sure that all of your information is correct and accurate. Next. All right. Woohoo! You will have, at this point, be through the application and have submitted. You will get an email confirmation. If you don't get an email confirmation, log back into the portal and make sure it is showing as submitted. If you have any questions or problems and you don't have that email that says, yes, you're good, email PAEPF@caforthearts.org and ask and let us know. Don't wait 3 weeks. The email should come immediately. So if you've submitted your application and it's been 10 minutes and you don't have a confirmation, then log back in and double check. All right. If we need more information, if we have questions, if we can't read your document, we will contact you. So once more, I say, make sure that the email that you're using is a good email, and also make sure you're always checking your spam folder through this process. Next. Okay, resources. Next, both in the links guide that Martha gave you and also in the program guidelines, there are a ton of useful resources, definitions and links and ways to help you. Review the guidelines and all of the application questions. Attend a second webinar if you have more questions. Go back and watch one of the videos. Email the PAEPF email. There are also going to be there are office hours you can sign up for. I do strongly recommend you ask your questions via email and not in person, particularly if you're asking for instructions. The reason for this is you then have a record of what you were told. All of us have been through the phone conversation where at the end we realize we can't read the notes we've just scribbled, or we forgot and wait, did she say this or did she say that? So I personally feel very strongly that information should be provided by email so you have a record. So when you go to implement the information you've been given, you have notes to refer back to. Doesn't mean you can't set up an office hour if there's something you feel like could be clarified better if you had an in-person conversation, but I really recommend a follow-up email, even if you do that. Set up your GoSmart portal now, your GoSmart account. Don't wait to the morning of March 10th to be doing that process. Gather your documents and organize them on your computer so they're easy to just do an upload. Make March 10th as easy, or whatever day you choose to apply, as easy for yourself as possible. Questions will be much easier for us to answer, not the morning of March 10th and not March 9th at midnight. So give yourself some prep time, so you have your time for questions and issues and problems. Make sure your authorized signer is on your statement of information. When you go to the Secretary of State site to check your status, make sure that your statement of information is current, and you will find on there are officers listed. This authorized signer needs to be one of the officers listed on the statement of information, not somebody who's just the agent, but one of the officers. Tell your friends, your colleagues, your friendly enemies who are potentially eligible organizations, anybody that you know, encourage them to apply, encourage them to come get information. Next, go to the GoSmart portal and check out the tips. Next, this is the sheet that gives you instructions on the famous Secretary of State website. Next, use a valid and actively monitored email address. Next, ask for help. We're here. Let us help you. Next. All right. I would be remiss not to encourage you to consider membership in Californians for the Arts or California Arts Advocates. We are here to help, but the only way we can exist is through membership. As hard as it is for everyone to raise money, it's even harder for service organizations. Many foundations are not interested in supporting service organizations. Next. I also want to invite all of you to participate. In April, we have two big statewide events in Sacramento. One is the Arts and Culture Summit, which is a day of networking and education and great programming. The next day is Arts Advocacy Day. About 200 to 300 of us gather. And we start in the park with a great rally with speakers and performers. And then everyone goes en masse to scheduled meetings with legislators. The impact of these meetings is tremendous. This is your opportunity to have somebody else book a meeting and be there and give you materials, and you go and tell your legislators how arts funding and how the things in the budget this year directly impact your organization. Your chance to go to them and say, thank you for supporting the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund, because it's going to help us. Next. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your advocacy to help us make this program possible. We encourage you to apply, to ask questions. And Beatrice, do you have any questions to wrap us up?
Yeah, somebody's asked if they plan to employ someone, if they can submit. Yes, you can estimate what you are thinking you're going to pay them, and they have to be an employee in order to be eligible for reimbursement. If you estimate, you will be held to the estimate or the payroll expenses, whichever's lower.
And just to clarify, yes, you can for like Q1 or Q2
Right.
of 2025. You will have to actually pay them before you receive
Yes.
the money. So
Yes.
the one thing you can't do is get the money first and then pay the employees. It has to be a reimbursement.
Yes.
Anything else?
Nothing. People, as in every webinar so far, have, and you've answered it, but people are asking, is this just a 1-year thing? It is just a 1-year thing for now. we wanted it to be more than a 1-year thing, and it can be more than a 1-year thing, maybe, if we can convince a legislature how wonderful it is and that they need to fund it for future years. So hear the clarion call and join California for the Arts, California Arts Advocate, your local organizations that are helping to advocate for this. It's super, super important.
If you get funded, thank your local legislator for doing it. Encourage your local legislator, contact your legislators and say, this is a great program and we hope it continues because here's the impact it had for us. Okay, anything else? Any parting wisdom, Beatrice?
Well, I think I just gave it.
Okay,
That's all I got.
that's all you got. Any parting wisdom, Martha?
No, just we're a resource for you. Please write or sign up to speak to us if you need more help.
Okay. Thank you again, Jennifer, for being here with us. Thank you to my team. Thank you, Allison, our silent genius in the background. And I give you all 5 minutes back in your day. You'll get a follow-up email and then some other follow-up communications between now and when the application portal opens. Good luck, begin preparing, and we can't wait to hear all of the happy reports of success. Thank you all.